Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
I'm your host, Scott Henderson, and my co-host is Dr. J. We have a special friend and guest coming on today. Jason, who do we have?
Today, we have someone who has incredible amounts of experience. Who do you know that has been in business for 43 years doing essentially the same thing? In the industrial real estate space, this guy is the bomb.com. And not only that, he's been an entrepreneur since a very young age. I mean, there's not many people at the age of 14 will go out and convince 40 of his peers to come to work for him while they improve 70 properties in one weekend. The guy has been doing it a very long time, and he's going to come on our show today to tell us his wisdom, share with his wisdoms and nuggets how to be better entrepreneurs and to get to the top of your game faster. Welcome to Joel Friedland.
Hey, thanks, guys. Good to see you.
We're excited to have you on. Tell us a little bit, some of your history. So, how'd you get to where you're at? Why you like industrial real estate versus commercial versus residential?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in industrial real estate for 43 years. I went to work as a 22-year-old graduate from the University of Michigan. I was a Wolverine. I went to work for a family, father, two sons, and a daughter. Their last name was Podolsky, which is a great name. It's when you're calling people up and you say, "Hey, I'm with Podolsky and Associates." They say that again. It's not like Henderson. So does it end with a Y or with an I? So I worked for this family, and they owned about $500 million worth of industrial real estate in 1981. Interest rates were 17%. They had 10 vacant buildings out of their 84 industrial buildings, and they hired me to go find tenants. That was my job. So I went cold calling in industrial parks. I parked my car in front of a building, let's say on a street called Industrial Drive, and I would literally go straight to the front door of each building, walk in, even though there was a no soliciting sign on the door. And I'd walk in and I'd say, "I need to talk to the owner of the company to see if you guys might want to move. I have a vacant building 3 doors away, and I think you'd be really happy moving into our vacant building and being the tenant." And I probably got in to see 3 out of every 10 stop-ins. There are 16,000 industrial buildings in our market, which is the Chicago area. And I've probably been inside of 15,000 of them in the 43 years I've been in the business.
So just a couple.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So you started going that, tell us what happened. Did you find tenants for them? Were they happy with you?
Yeah, I filled up 9 of the buildings in the first year as an industrial real estate broker. And I'll talk to you about industrial and what it is. As an industrial real estate broker, I have been involved in 2,000 leases and sales over the years. And one of the things that is most important is understanding what industrial is and how it works. So during the time that I was a broker working for the Podolsky family, I started acquiring and developing industrial buildings and syndicating. So I'm a syndicator. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and I've bought hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate. By the way, today we do all of our deals either debt-free, 0 mortgage, or 30% maximum loan-to-value ratio. So during the time I was a broker, I was making all these leases and sales. I said, "Geez, well, the Podolskys are really wealthy, but I don't think it's because they were brokers. I think it's because they were owners." So I went to the father, his name was Milton Podolsky, and I said, "Hey, Milt, I want to be like you. I want to own properties." And he said, "Son, I'll invest with you. I'll put up 1/3 of the money if you'd like to go out and find a deal, but you're going to have to find the other 2/3 of the money and you're going to have to find the deal. So I started doing these little syndications. For the first one was 560,000, all cash, no debt. The second one was 2.5 million, all cash, no debt. And I just kept going. And the Podolskis were fantastic to me, but eventually I wasn't part of the family. I went out and started a new business with 3 partners where I could be an owner of the firm as opposed to being an employee of Milton, Bonnie, and Randy and Steve, who, by the way, I still love them. I'm still close with them. I love Steve Podolsky. Hi, Steve. Uh, he listens to every interview, and I have to give him a lot of credit. He was a great mentor, and that's what it takes, I think, to be really successful, is having a knowledgeable mentor. And Steve was fantastic. Lately, we've been buying nothing but industrial buildings with manufacturers in them. An industrial building is a box. Every building is a box. They're made out of bricks, or they're made out of precast or tilt up, and they're tall or they're short. Sometimes they're 30 feet high, and sometimes they're 16 feet high. They have truck docks. Without truck docks, you can't operate an industrial business, because over-the-road trucks that carry the products, the raw materials and the finished products, are 4 feet off the ground. Every truck in the world is 4 feet off the ground. And that's because the bottom of the truck has to exactly match up with where the opening is in the building that's 4 feet off the ground. So every semi that backs up to a truck dock is at a level where all they have to do is put what's called a leveler. It's a piece of equipment. You pull a cord, and it's hydraulic, and it's like a dock plate, and it goes between the opening between the door and the truck, so that the forklift trucks drive inside the building and they don't fall in the crevice. So it's like a little bridge. Every industrial building has to have truck docks, and they have to have heavy power because there's a lot of manufacturing that goes on. And they have to have some office, as little as possible, because most people don't want to work in offices anymore, but you do need some. And these buildings are anywhere between, let's say, 10,000 square feet and 1 million square feet. And I've bought buildings in Florida and in New York, Ohio, the Chicago area, and every deal's different and every company's different. We have some amazing manufacturers who make crazy products, protein bars, equipment for the welding industry. There's a company that's not our tenant. They sharpen knives for restaurants. Do you know that restaurants lease their knives in the kitchen?
I didn't.
You go to Chipotle, they don't own their knives. Chop, chop, chop. Rent them from Cozini all over the country, because knives get dull, and most restaurants don't have knife sharpeners. But this one company's got 60 guys in the back of an industrial building working at 60 knife sharpening pieces of equipment. And they trade out every couple of weeks. A van comes and picks up the dull knives, and then they hand off the new knives, which are exactly the ones that are the same as the other ones, because they have an order that's a standing order. And thousands and thousands of restaurants every week rent their knives from Cozini. That's what's done in the back of industrial buildings, just putting stuff together, manufacturing, lots of people working, usually like 40, 60, 100 people working in the warehouse doing their assembly work. And big racks, these giant racks. Like, have you seen buildings that Amazon's in?
Oh, yeah.
Those are industrial buildings, and the internet's been so hot. It's grown so much that every time a store closes, a warehouse opens, and that's industrial. And those are the kind of buildings we own. Industrial gives a better return than multifamily, significantly better. We don't buy a building unless it's a 7 or 8% cash flow, all cash, which means NOI.
So why do you think it is more profitable than single family or than residential?
It's harder to get into. Anyone can get into residential. There's no barrier to entry.
You mean the purchaser or the tenants?
Purchaser.
Okay, keep going.
Investor, there's hardly any investors that you'll ever find on the internet who do industrial. Like when you go to a podcast, there's 4 guys. We all know each other who are ever doing podcasts on industrial. Because and how many multifamily guys are there? I'd say there's 4,000 syndicators, developers, whatever you want to call them, in the United States with $50 million or more in equity under management, not properties. If you have a 75% loan, you got 50 million. That means you have $200 million worth of property. But 50 million or more, I'd say there's roughly 4,000 syndicators like that. And of those 4,000, I would say that 3,500 are multifamily or residential in some manner. And maybe 150 are industrial, maybe 150 do retail. A lot of them do self-storage today, hundreds.
So I got a question. If it's so profitable, why do you only leverage it to 30%? Is that just how you were trained? Is there some specific reason behind that?
Yeah, I got burned. I do we swear on this podcast? I got really badly hurt. I've been through 4 cycles in my 43 years, 4 down cycles. And in 2008, I had 50 industrial buildings, and I had 7 banks. I had approximately 20 million in personal guarantees at the banks. And the big problem is vacancy, interest rate risk. Things go wrong, and I'm not interested in having what happened in 2008 happen again. And I can tell you the reason that I had losses. I had 10 losses out of 100 deals that I've done. Leverage, 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 leverage. I can say it 10 times. If I didn't have debt, I would still own those buildings that I lost money on, and I would have made a lot of money, and my investors would have made a lot of money. Now, out of 4,000 syndicators with 50 million or more under management, I would say there's only one who does no debt deals, and I'm it. And a lot of people think I'm a stupid idiot because leverage really works well in real estate when things are working well. But I got so badly burned, and I was in such a bad place. I was in such a dark place when things were bad that I decided, I'm 64 years old. I don't need the aggravation of having a bank own me. You know, you're a slave to your lender. It's just what it is. 3,999 of the guys are slaves to their lender. The lender says jump, you go, okay, how high? And I'm not against people doing leverage. It's just not for me. And it's not for my people. My people that invest with me are extremely wealthy and extremely careful. Preservation of capital is number one. Warren Buffett's rule, number 1 rule, never
Don't
lose
lose money.
Second rule,
Remember
go back
rule
to
number
rule number
1.
1. Well, that's how I feel. I feel like if I do all cash deals, losing money is nearly impossible. And if I can get a 7 or 8% rate of yield, you know, why do I need? I had dinner with a really old friend of mine last night who's a syndicator. He does multifamily, he does self-storage. Great guy, amazing guy. And he's trying to buy 101 units, residential units. And he was telling me how he's trying to do it. And I broke it down for him. And I said, let's talk about your deal. Let's not talk about me. Let's talk about your deal. What is your cap rate? And he said, it's 6.7. I said, I'm going to prove to you that it isn't. We were sitting down. I don't drink anymore. So I was drinking my cranberry juice. And so I could still think clearly. And I said to him, okay, let's run through your numbers. And he was telling me that he's got one tranche that's preferred equity and one tranche that is like an in-between tranche where he's giving them some kind of a special return, and then the regular guys who have the big upside. And we figured it out. They're getting a 4% yield after all things are said and done. He didn't even realize it. He's trying to jam like this round peg into a square hole. And the question is, why are you even doing this deal? And he said, well, there's going to be rent growth. I said, what if there isn't? So I'm one of these guys who looks at things from 43 years of experience, and I say, what are you really doing here? What the hell is this? Why are you doing this? And I have to ask myself that every time I do one of my deals. And I've walked away from the 4 deals that I've looked at in the past year. I've walked away from 2 of them during due diligence because they didn't work. And I didn't know they didn't work until I did my due diligence. But I figured out HVAC problems, risky tenant problems, loading docks that are hard to get into. Believe it or not, one of them, the village has the right to approve the companies that move in, and they have to go through a zoning meeting, which delays 60 days. No tenant who's looking at 2 buildings is going to pick the one where there's a 60-day delay and the village can tell them you can't move here. So I had to walk away from that. And I didn't know it until I had spent $40,000 on due diligence. So I'm super careful and I'm incredibly risk averse. And that's just where I come from because that's my experience.
That's a great experience. In the event that you could tell us maybe your top 3 lessons you've learned from doing due diligence. I mean, if you're going to say, here are the 3 things you need to make sure you investigate and look at when you're going through due diligence, what would you say those are?
Okay. There are probably 100 and none of them are the top 3 because any one of them can trip you up.
Okay.
In our case, I want to see the leases. Got to see the leases. I've got to understand the default risk with tenants. That's really big because people say, hey, I'm buying this building. I've got $1 million of NOI. Really? Is that based on 100% occupancy? Yes. Are you going to be 100% occupied? No. Okay, so your NOI must be a little bit off, right? And is this a Class A place where everybody pays the rent on time? No, Class C. Oh, how many people currently aren't paying their rent? Oh, okay. 15 units out of 100 units are not exactly paying their rent. Okay, just the leases. I want to understand that. That's really important. In industrial, we have to look at the financial statements of tenants. That's really important. We want to make sure that they're not about to go out of business or that they won't be able to pay the rent. We check every physical aspect. We've got an inspector that goes in and charges us about 10 grand for each building. And he does a 200-page, just like a rundown on everything wrong with the building. But instead of just trusting him, we also get our own HVAC guy on his own because that's the biggest cost usually. Roof guy, because that's the second biggest cost usually. Structural guy, civil engineering, got to get the plumbing and the electric inspected. All these things, the inspections are the second thing after making sure you know what your tenants are up to. And then you got to make sure you talk to the municipal government people, the village or town manager, and make sure you understand what they're thinking because they may not be aligned with what we're thinking. So there's so much. And here's the one answer I've got for you of how to do it. Not by yourself. I've got a committee. I call them my advisory group, and I've got 8 guys on the advisory group, and they're all smart investors. And we have a Zoom call to talk about, I say to them, you throw me your roughest, toughest questions to try to trip me up and figure out what's wrong with this deal. And I expect every one of you to at least have one or two tough questions. So there's got to be 15 or 20 really tough questions that the advisory board on the Zoom call talks about. And I have to get answers for all those, because doing it by myself, if you really want to make a deal, you can ignore something really easily and say, yeah, it's not a big deal. And it is a big deal. And they'll call you on it. And Steve Podolsky is one of the head guys, my mentor from when I was 22 years old, 43 years later, is actually one of the two sort of chairman of my advisory group. And he's been in the business for 55 years. Hang on, I just lost you.
No,
Scott?
I was muted. Scott has a new baby, and sometimes he'll turn off his camera there. He's still there, trust me.
That's why he looks tired.
Yeah. So this advisory, is that would you almost call it a mastermind of sorts that you have, that you bring your deals to them and they say you ask them to ask you hard questions?
No, they're investors of mine.
So they're all investors.
Yeah.
And you come up with a deal and you say,
Yeah.
okay, here's the deal, put holes in it, basically.
Right.
Tell me where I'm wrong, what I'm doing wrong, what I'm not thinking of.
Right.
And wow, that's a great fail-safe to make sure that you make good decisions.
Yeah.
And even your former mentor is part of that. That speaks a lot to your track record and what you're doing. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing we do that I think is very unusual is we have an internal group that put up the money to go buy properties, so we don't have to borrow money to buy them, and we can syndicate them after we buy them. So this group shares in our preferred in our promote, our carried interest.
Walk me through that. Okay. You find a $25 million building down in Houston, great industrial location, good tenants, everything, everything checks out. You go in there, write them an all cash offer.
Yeah.
You close.
Yeah.
And then you syndicate it. What does that look like? I mean, what's your pref? How do your splits? What does it look like? Because then that's how you because all your equity's in that building, but then by syndicating it, you're getting basically your capital back so you can go to the next one.
Yeah, it's wash, rinse, recycle. We use the money to buy building 1, and then after we buy building 1, we syndicate it, and then we go take that money, we buy building 2, and then we syndicate it, and we use the money to go buy building 3, and we syndicate it. And during the period of time that money is being used as the capital for a building, for a purchase, that group gets the cash flow that comes out of there on that money. When we're not using it, I keep it in treasury bills, usually 60-day treasury bills. Today they're paying 5.3. And if we buy a 7% building, the amount of money that's unsyndicated is making 7% or whatever it is.
So you don't promise them like a preferred rate?
I promise nothing. No, you can't.
You just say, okay, I have this building. We're selling 70% of it to the limited partners. We're retaining 30%, and they get all the income from the building, or do they get 70% of it?
They get all of it. This group is pari passu, which is equal shares with whatever they put in. Someone puts in $1 million into the deal, they get, let's say that there's $10 million in the pot, they get 10% of everything. We take no fees on that. We take no profits on that. We just use that money to go buy the next one, and then each of those investors stays in with a certain amount in each deal. So we leave a little bit of that money in each one as we go to the next and the next and the next. And that way I can pick and choose my investors. I don't have to worry about finding investors and scrambling, because I want to pick investors who are aligned with us in terms of our values and our objectives. And I don't want to be out there looking for people desperately to find a way to close a deal. That doesn't make any sense.
It's okay to say you don't want people that are pain in the backside.
Well, sometimes I do, by the way. Sometimes you'd think that, but sometimes the biggest pain in the backside is your best advisory board member. Like I just got a new advisory board member on the group. So one of the guys, there's 8 of us, and one of the guys, there's 8 of them. One of the guys sort of is less active. So I brought in a new guy, and the new guy was brought in because he is a very tough question asker. And rather than looking at him as being a pain in the butt, I look at him as being a value add. So some of the toughest investors are the best. I'm not afraid of tough investors. What I'm afraid of is investors who have bad intent, who just, you want to deal with people. I think a good marriage is based on, for example, the spouses having aligned values. If you are a guy and you marry a woman and she's like wild and doing crazy things and cheating on you, and she's just a wacko, and you're like a stable person who's a loyal, like straight line values guy, it's not going to work. So before anybody comes into our deal, I do personally, I talk to them. If I do less than an hour, it's no good. And I'm old fashioned. I keep this book. It's this book, I call it my investor book. And when I talk to a new investor, I take notes. I want to know everything about him or her. I want to know how many kids, where they came from, are their parents living, what did they do for a living? I want to know what other deals they're in. We get into sometimes talk about, their religious beliefs and their practices, like things that they do that are important to them, their hobbies. Because honestly, we're going to know each other for a really long time. We're going to be partners for a long time. Long time. We hold our buildings for a minimum, let's call it a median. The median middle number of years is probably 15 years per deal. We're not into buying and then let it go. Like if we find a great property,
you're going for the cash flow, the long-term cash flow. And I'm
yeah,
assuming then
yeah.
you don't do cost segregation, because really industrial.
We do cost segregation.
Is there much to segregate out though that depreciates
Yeah.
differently?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
most of the that I've seen, are cement wall, beam over the top, roll up door here, maybe roll up door in the back, and empty. There's
No.
not a whole lot, like, because you usually get your carpet, your drapes, your finishers, your furniture, and all those different things that you can depreciate faster.
There's a ton in industrial.
There is. Interesting. We're
Yeah.
going to have a cost seg specialist come on here in a couple of months, talk to us about that. Interesting. We'll have to ask that question. I didn't realize.
Yeah, we did 5 of them in the last 30 days. Yeah. Yeah, they work for industrial. Yeah, so anyway, so we syndicate sort of after we buy. Sometimes we buy something, we put it out there, and we get immediate investors who are long-term investors with us that take a chunk of it. They just don't want to be left out of a deal if it's the right deal. And we invite our other investors who aren't on the advisory committee to sit in and listen to the meeting. So they hear all the negative stuff.
How is it that you, and maybe you don't want to answer this question, how is it that you personally benefit from? Do you have a salary from that? Do you retain some ownership in the building and therefore you have part of the cash flow?
No.
What's in it for you? I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
I don't have to beg. I don't have to find a bank and beg them to do a deal. I don't have to find investors and beg them to come in. I get to have a position of staying power. It's totally about staying power. It's being in a position of controlling your destiny. And then we make the money on the deals we buy, not on that group. That group makes money. I don't make money from them. They make money from me. They get a piece of the fees for being my group that puts the money up so that I don't have to worry about anything. Because anxiety is bad. Makes you do bad things. So what about your deal? Tell me, it sounds like you're doing something very exciting.
Well, we've so Scott's my oldest son, and when he, he got a degree in business with an emphasis in marketing, and my dad was in real estate. I've done some real estate after I went to graduate school, got a PhD and stuff, la 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 la. And he goes, I want to do real estate. I want to do real estate. And I said, you don't know what a good deal is. And so I said, I want you to go walk. I can't remember if I said 50
100.
or 100. Did I say 100?
Different deals.
100 different deals that you got to go find some realtors, show you, income properties. You don't know what to look for. And I had created a spreadsheet. I said, fill these out. This will show you the numbers. This is goes and educating what's an NOI, with appreciation, without depreciation, all these different things.
Yeah.
So he's in the process of this, and this guy, kind of asked him, how'd you actually meet Randy, Scott?
I had a high school friend, so I actually had finished the 100 deals and had bought my first, and we were almost done with our second deal that we were buying. And a high school friend of mine was in property management, reached out to me. He's like, dude, this guy is awesome. He's been doing all these deals. He built one of the largest mortgage companies in the United States back before 2008 and 9. Like, just come meet him with me. So I walked into his office, about 5 minutes of shooting the breeze. He just out of the blue, hey, I want you to run my mortgage company. Come learn. And so I, on the spot, accepted the offer and started down that route, which is different from what my family's done. My family hasn't done financing hardly at all. So I learned his business model. After about 6 months, I figured out how to do hard money and broker hard money myself. And then probably 6 months after that, we started raising capital for our own deals, and it's just kind of blossomed from there. So in this whole process, I got connected to a CPA who was building his firm, and just with what I was doing and the investors we had, they needed someone very specific. He just happened to fit. So I helped him build his company, and then he got swooped up by a family office up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, who does large loans for what's called business sustainability or ESG loans. And he came right to me. He's like, you guys are the perfect fit. Like, we want to do business with you. We'll put up all the capital to do one of these. And so we're in the process of doing 2 tranches with them. One where we come to the table with 15 million and get access to 150, and the other one where they're going to put up 30 million for us and we'll get access to 300 million. So we're right in the middle of negotiating and getting approvals and going back and forth and applications done. And so it's been this whirlwind where all the pieces are starting to come together. It's been fun to see.
That sounds great. And I like the father and son thing. My son's in the business as well. I have a partner, so I have a main partner. He's got 3 sons. They're too young to be in. One day they'll probably come in too. If they can stand working with their dad. My son puts up with me, same way you probably put up with your dad. It's really nice to have that. But my son works for Eric and for me, and he's learning, and he's looking for deals, and he's learned what we think is a good deal and a bad deal. And he's meeting with brokers, and he's finding off-market deals. So it's a similar dynamic to what you guys are doing. I think it's great.
Thanks. We've had a lot of fun with it. We've certainly gone a lot further than we thought we'd ever go.
And you're a new dad?
I am. I
First
had my
time?
first about 2 months ago.
Congratulations. What do you have?
A little girl,
What's her name?
Scotty Jane Henderson.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah, I'm a little biased to the name, but my wife's the one that picked it, so I'm not complaining.
That's so cute.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
It's been a whirlwind of adjustments.
And as a grandfather, are you just like having the best time?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit of adjustment though for the fact that that's our first grandchild,
Mhm.
and I don't feel old enough to have that title yet, and so it feels
It takes getting
uncomfortable.
used to. Yeah. It's when she starts calling you something and you got a name and she knows you, and about about a year from now, we
Yeah,
got
everybody.
we got a 5, a 2, and a 1
Oh yeah.
grandkids. Yeah. The greatest.
Well, as we're staying, been kind of blessed. Scott, tell you a little bit about this deal right now, but it's been, from where he started. I do a lot with the infinite banking concept, which is basically teaching people how to be their own banker, but
I've
built on a
I've seen
whole
that.
life policy, right?
Yes.
And so I've been doing that for about 18 years. And this podcast kind of came from us, Dad, we have some overlap. He's way over here in hard money, and you're way over here in teaching people to, loan money to themselves or loan judiciously using their own money, which is kind of like hard money lending.
Yeah.
Let's put together this podcast and see what comes from it. And we've had a few doors open. We've met some people. This thing, Scott, this accountant has been key to it, but we also have some other countermeasures, if you will, or counterparts, partners that we have met through some connections that we've been able to perform. You do something for someone and they like what you do, they want to do it again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been key
That's
to
right.
this whole thing too. We have this other group that's from the southeast part of the United States. We helped them raise some money. We bought a hotel in downtown New Orleans. We changed it to condos and turned around and started selling the individual condos. We had a guy approach us in the process saying, "Hey, you guys are doing this all wrong. They're 2 bedroom, 1 bath. Um, you need to make them into 4 bedroom, 2 baths." And so he bought 2 units from us side by side, just under $750,000. He put about $60,000 into it by tearing out the middle wall, right, between these
Yeah.
two condos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Turns around getting appraisals right around $1 million.
Oh.
So then we started doing some of those, and we started at the end we were about $29 million in debt, and we're almost got it completely paid off by the condos that was sold off and stuff. Anyway, we've helped with that, and then that turned into another project with this group and gone on and on. And so it's been, I don't know if I want to say, I don't want to call it lucky. That's not the right word. Fortunate, blessed, I think feels
Yeah.
more
Right.
correct.
Right.
Um, However, it's also been for the fact that we've been straight up with people. We tell them the facts, we tell them the way it's going to be, and we've performed.
Yeah.
We do have a hard money debt fund that we started last year. It's under a PPM. I mean, it's all perfectly legit and legal and
Yeah.
filed and everything. And our first quarter was the fourth quarter of last year, and we paid out on an annualized basis 10.5% on January 15th. So, we're out there raising money for that, doing what we can but we don't loan on anything we don't know. We strictly stay to what we know. I think that's one of the things you said earlier about, your what works for you, and you're not going
Yeah.
to go anywhere.
Yeah. I have words of caution on a continuous raise lending fund. Be very careful. Never over distribute. Ever. And the problem is if you over distribute, I'm very familiar with those funds.
What do you mean over distribute?
Well, if you tell people they're going to make a certain return, you can't just distribute it because you told them that. You can only really distribute what you make,
Oh, right.
right?
Yeah, that's built into our PPM. That's we have, what we say we're going to make. I mean, when I said a minute ago, the amount we did, that's well above what we kind of promised, under the PPM, although there's no real promise. It's like the distributions will be based on what we make. There's no,
Yeah.
you're not going to get any, but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's
Be
good
super
advice.
careful. I've seen there's a group that's in Everett, Washington, that became very big in doing that. And they, once you over distribute one time, It's hard to tell your investors you over distributed and admit you made a mistake, because who likes admitting a mistake? So then you do it a second time, and then you do it a third time, and now you're committing fraud. So you got to be real careful on that.
In problems, yeah.
Real careful. Just make sure you don't over distribute. And if there's bad news, the bad news has to be on the table the minute it happens. You can't wait and say, hey, let's just do it this quarter, and next quarter we'll see if we can fix it. So be super careful. It's a great business if it works, if your lenders, if your borrowers can afford to pay you back. But if there's a default and it affects everything, just admit it and disclose it. That's all I can tell you. I've not seen one of these go bad, not just one, where the guys in your position over distributed. I have seen it many times, because while you're raising money, it sort of feels like, well, we're just raising money. It's a startup. We have to give them a big number because that's what they're expecting. And the problem with that is those people started distributing money coming from the new investors to the old investors. And that's when it gets way out.
Ponzi scheme.
I don't even like saying the word, but
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Those kind of funds can turn into one real fast. Real fast.
I'm aware. I've seen 2 or 3 of them fail just within the last 12 months. I actually know one of the owners quite well. Are you familiar with Broadmark?
So familiar. I have a friend who bought $4 million worth of stock in Broadmark.
The guy who started it sold out probably 10, maybe not 10 years ago, but five-ish years ago. And my goodness, that was quite the kaput.
Yeah. When they were doing deals so I was watching for my friend because I'm really close with him. He's on my board of advisors. And he said they were paying 10% at the time. And he said, I'm going to buy this stuff. And he bought $1 million worth of stock. And then he bought 2 million, and then 3 million, and then 4 million. And all of a sudden, it turns out that the management gets fired. Everybody who worked there got fired, and they cut their distribution down. And I'm not saying that one's a Ponzi. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. It just turned into a really rotten deal. And then when they got bought out by, what's the name of the company that bought them out? I forgot. It's a public company.
I don't
Capital,
know.
something Capital. His 4 million today might be, if he's lucky, worth 2 million. Because it went bad. And there's this one up in Everett, Washington. I know 5 people who are in it, and it's just a shit show. So be careful. It's a great thing to do if you do it in a way where it's all disclosed, good and bad. That's the key to that deal.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, that's good advice. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interesting. I hope that ESG thing goes really well for you.
Well, we do too.
Us
We'll
too.
let you know.
It's exciting.
Well,
go ahead.
Jason.
I was just gonna say, Joel, we're kind of running out of time that we have to spend with you. We want to know, is there any parting words or something that you would share with people? I mean, you've talked a little bit about mentorship, which seems to be key in your success, and you still have in this advisory board. I'm super intrigued by that, how you do that. That's also kind of like a mentorship type thing. Do you mentor other people, or do you?
I do. I've hired and trained 70 people in my industry over the 4.5 decades. So there are probably 20 remaining of those that I've mentored. They are very successful people, and I enjoy teaching and mentoring. I do it. I don't do it for very many outside people. Usually I bring them into the company and I mentor them and train them, and they become deal finders for us, sourcers of deals or something. And I like to do that. It's a fun thing to do. I can tell if someone's going to be successful or not within a week. You know what the answer is? They ask really good questions all the time. The ones who ask no questions, they fail. And all my friends who are super, super, super wealthy, they all ask good questions all the time. They're curious and they want to understand things, and they don't just take things on face value. They just keep asking. And that's like a bullet question. Like, what about this? It's like, okay. And you have to respect them for it. That's how they got where they are. They understand things because they ask things. So that to me is number one. Be curious, ask a lot of questions, really understand the situation. Don't make any assumptions. And there's that book called The Four Agreements. And
Yes.
one of the agreements is don't assume anything because it'll mess you up.
I was just 2 weeks ago, I was in a kind of a gathering and mastermind type thing. And Jeff Hoffman, I don't know if you know who that is, started Priceline, booking.com. They do north of 130 billion a year in sales.
Yeah.
He was one of the keynotes, and he shared with us 3 different things that the most creative people do. And one of them was, he called it the 5-year-old day. And ever so often you see the world through the eyes of a 5-year-old that's always asking why.
Yeah.
Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why do we, everything. And it was rather comical, some of the things the experiences he's had where they have been able to become much more efficient by simply questioning, like you're saying. So I'm right on board with you there. I think that's a phenomenal advice. Scott?
Well, I was just going to say, if any of our listeners wanted to get in touch with you or invest funds with you, how would they go about doing so?
Our company is called Brit Properties, BRIT with 1 T, BritProperties.com. And Brit, just to give you a quick background, when we had to rename our company because I sold a company that I had started years ago. And I had to restart a new company. We had a property manager named Brad, and I had to come up with a name. He said, "What are you going to name the company?" I said, Brit Properties. He said, what does that mean? Brad really is terrific. So it's named after our property manager.
Perfect. So guys, we will make sure to put all of this down in the show notes below. Joel, thank you again for joining us. We've had such a fun time. And please, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you. This is great, you guys. It's really congrats again on enjoy the baby. I hope Scotty's the best. I'm sure she will be. And enjoy the father and son situation. It's fantastic, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Guys, please remember, we will put all of Joel's links, just like I said, in the show notes below. If you'd like to connect with Jason or I, make sure to hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever your favorite social platform is. Again, check the show notes below. Our links are there as well. Last, remember, mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.